many people work with the oceans from a land perspective, but have never been out in operations. Can you talk a bit about the experience you get or the lessons you learn when you are actually in the oceans and actually have a work outside? Because that seems like that's hard to teach, it seems like, because you sort of have to been there, experienced it to truly understand how it works.
Yeah, it's very two different separate worlds, and it's really interesting because the shipboard versus the seaboard life is a lot different. And to tell you the truth, the shipboard is much more focused on the daily operation. It's getting the ship from point A to point B. It's the offloading, loading. It's very immediate, and so that focus is really utilitarian. You're working the ship, you're doing, keeping the maintenance up, you're able to get it. But in truth, almost everything happens on shoreside, all the planning, all the preparations. You don't pull into a port to load without having everything figured out before you arrive. There's such a huge shoreside infrastructure that goes into the vessels. And, in the past, it's been very separate because of technology and communications. Once you set off from shore, it used to be the only communication you had was radio, maybe a telex, basically a text, you would get to the ship and that's it. Today, it's instantaneous. Today, you're in almost constant contact. You can track vessels through AIS and you can monitor and really increase the efficiency of ships. And that's one of the things we've been seeing in the shipping industry quite a bit is as ships get larger, the crews get smaller. But that shoreside element becomes much more important. It's an orchestration. When you bring a ship in, a container ship with 10,000 containers, and you have to offload them, that is a symphony of movement that has to be done. It's not just putting boxes in an empty slot. Everything has to be configured for port of embarkation. There are load compatibility issues. There's weight issues. And, when you're throwing your lines on and you're tying up at a port, those cranes are coming across, you're on popping containers, you're ready for them to come off. And you don't make money when you're in port. You make money when you're at sea. You want to be moving. You always want to be moving. The worst thing you want to be doing is sitting off a port or tied to a berth, waiting. You want to keep that ship moving. And so you have those two different areas. And one of the things that's really interesting to me is how much those two areas don't overlap. Very few people go from the ship to shore or from the shore to ship. They operate as almost two separate worlds. And it's very few times you'll see, senior masters or engineers take that job ashore. They also don't transition very well, I'd argue. They, working on a ship tends to be very fast, very quick, and a little bit more coarse. You tend to bark orders a lot more. That doesn't always work in an office environment.
That's a great point. I also think when you read culture decks to shipping companies, etc., and they say how they behave, sometimes, at least I worked for the cruise line industry, sometimes to get that culture from a slide deck on board isn't necessarily that easy because sometimes a ship operates like a planet on their own, right? With strong hierarchies and also sometimes some parts seems better written on paper, but in practice it's hard to get out, right? So have you also seen that is also an interesting part of running a shipping company? Because it's like you said, it's not so much overlapping in terms of the different jobs to be done.
Right. I mean, a cruise company is a perfect example of that because not only that, you have separate areas on the cruise ship. So it's very siloed in the different areas. So you have the engine plant, you have the bridge crew, you have the hotel services. And, there always seems to be a little bit of distrust between the two sides. It's I have this great idea how to make your ship more efficient. It's like, well, what do you know? You're not on board. You don't know the intricacies. And it's the same way. And I think one of the big things is to build that trust between each other, to have that ability to show it. When I came ashore from working afloat, I had a little more credibility. I could talk about things and I would be asked things than someone who just maybe came right out of university, out of college, and they start coming up with these ideas like, hey, this is the way we did it. And this is a smart way to do it. And, I think you can do it. And I think one of the things that smart shipping companies do is they start tapping into that population, that pool of workers they have on ships and integrate them a little bit earlier into shore work. And I think that's a really key thing. We tend to keep it so totally separate. And, like I said, when you bring a master on board, someone who's sailed for 20, 30 years, they're not good at a group meeting. They're just not. They tend to want to bark an order out. And this is the way it's going to go. And a lot of time on a ship, you have to give a very quick order. I sailed for a long time, and one of the things I've had to learn how to do is really calm down my language and not be as salty in the past. And that works great on a ship when someone's life is in danger because they stepped on a line or did something. That doesn't work in a meeting. And I think a lot of smart companies today are looking at how can I tap into that talent that's afloat, bring that practical experience ashore, but at the same time, measure it with, okay, that sounds great on a boat, but that's not going to work on shore. This is how we need to do it. And so, a lot of teamwork has to be built in between them.